Imagine living a life so full of deception that even your closest friends and doctors are completely fooled. This was the reality for Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a young woman forced by her own mother to live a lie. Gypsy was portrayed as a severely ill child, suffering from a myriad of debilitating diseases. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more sinister. Her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, was the mastermind behind this intricate web of lies. She confined Gypsy to a wheelchair, subjected her to unnecessary medical treatments, and kept her in a perpetual state of childhood. The world saw a fragile, sickly girl, but in reality, Gypsy was a prisoner in her own home, trapped by her mother's manipulation. But as Gypsy grew older, the cracks in Dee Dee's carefully constructed facade began to show. Gypsy's awakening to the reality of her situation led to a desperate search for freedom. This search culminated in a shocking and brutal crime. In June 2015, Gypsy and her secret online boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn, carried out a plan to murder Dee Dee. The murder of Dee Dee Blanchard revealed the dark and twisted truth behind Gypsy's life of fabricated illnesses and abuse. What drives a daughter to conspire in the murder of her own mother? Stay with us as we delve deep into the twisted case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, uncovering the layers of deception, manipulation, and the ultimate fight for freedom. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. From birth, Gypsy's life was overshadowed by her mother's claims that she was gravely ill. Dee Dee Blanchard, her mother, asserted that Gypsy had a host of severe medical conditions. By the age of 8, Gypsy was already being paraded around in a wheelchair, even though she could walk perfectly fine. Dee Dee insisted that Gypsy suffered from muscular dystrophy, leukemia, epilepsy, severe asthma, and developmental delays. As a result, Gypsy's childhood was marked by frequent hospital visits, unnecessary surgeries, and a life dominated by medications she didn't need. Dee Dee Blanchard was a master manipulator who wielded total control over her daughter. She thrived on the sympathy and attention Gypsy's illnesses brought her. Dee Dee presented herself as a devoted, selfless caregiver, earning admiration and support from everyone around her. She moved to Springfield, Missouri after Hurricane Katrina, where charitable organizations built her a home and provided financial assistance, believing they were helping a sick child and her struggling mother. Dee Dee's control over Gypsy was meticulous and ruthless. She homeschooled Gypsy, keeping her isolated from peers and ensuring she couldn't escape her fabricated reality. Dee Dee shaved Gypsy's head to maintain the illusion of chemotherapy treatments and used a feeding tube to provide nutrition, despite Gypsy being able to eat normally. The list of fabricated illnesses was extensive and shocking. Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had leukemia, which led to countless rounds of unnecessary medications and hospitalizations. She also asserted that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy, confining her to a wheelchair. Dee Dee convinced doctors that Gypsy had severe asthma, epilepsy, and a host of other ailments. Each condition came with its own set of treatments, surgeries, and medications. Dee Dee manipulated medical professionals by doctor hopping, ensuring no one could piece together the true story. She even went as far as to alter Gypsy's birth certificate, making her daughter appear younger than she was to justify her supposed developmental delays. Dee Dee's actions were extreme and calculated, creating a complex web of deceit that trapped Gypsy in a nightmare. Dee Dee's deception extended beyond medical professionals. She exploited Gypsy's supposed illnesses for financial gain, obtaining money from charities like Habitat for Humanity, Ronald McDonald House, and Make-A-Wish Foundation. They received free trips to Disney World, backstage passes to concerts, and various other perks. Dee Dee ensured that Gypsy was always presented as the picture of a brave, sick child battling impossible odds. The sympathy they garnered was immense, with people donating generously and offering support. This constant flow of attention and resources fueled Dee Dee's need to maintain the facade at all costs. Gypsy's life under Dee Dee's control was one of constant fear and manipulation. Dee Dee used physical abuse to maintain control, hitting Gypsy and threatening her whenever she questioned her conditions. Gypsy learned early on that any attempt to assert her independence or reveal the truth would be met with severe punishment. This abusive environment created a profound sense of helplessness in Gypsy, making her believe escape was impossible. As Gypsy grew older, her awareness of the lies and abuse intensified, leading her to seek a way out. Gypsy's childhood was stolen from her, replaced with a fabricated life of illnesses and dependence. Dee Dee's relentless manipulation and control isolated Gypsy from the outside world, creating an environment where Gypsy's reality was whatever Dee Dee dictated. This twisted dynamic set the stage for the desperate and tragic events that would eventually unfold, revealing the horrifying extent of Dee Dee's abuse and the lengths Gypsy would go to for freedom. As Gypsy Rose Blanchard entered her teenage years, she began to question the narrative that her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, had constructed around her. The first seeds of doubt were planted when Gypsy overheard doctors questioning her supposed illnesses and her mother's conflicting accounts. Despite Dee Dee's tight control, Gypsy found moments alone to explore the internet, leading her to the realization that she wasn't as sick as she had been led to believe. Gypsy discovered that many of the symptoms her mother described did not align with her own experiences or what she read online. This new knowledge was both liberating and terrifying. Gypsy had lived her entire life under the belief that she was frail and dependent, only to find out that she was physically capable and had been needlessly confined. In 2012, Gypsy's online explorations led her to a Christian dating site where she met Nicholas Godejohn. Nicholas, who had his own set of challenges, including a history of mental illness and a troubled past, quickly became a source of emotional support for Gypsy. Their relationship blossomed in the digital world, away from Dee Dee's prying eyes. Nicholas, who was several years older than Gypsy, offered her a glimpse of the outside world and a potential escape from her mother's oppressive control. The two bonded over their shared feelings of isolation and a mutual desire for a different life. They exchanged messages and video chats, building a relationship based on trust, shared dreams, and a common goal of breaking free from their respective chains. As their relationship deepened, Gypsy confided in Nicholas about the extent of her mother's abuse and manipulation. Nicholas, eager to be her savior, suggested they find a way to be together. Initially, the couple fantasized about running away and living a normal life. However, as they delved deeper into the logistics, they realized that Dee Dee's control was too tight for a simple escape. Dee Dee monitored Gypsy's communications, controlled her movements, and had legal authority over her. A straightforward escape seemed impossible. Desperation set in, and their conversations took a darker turn. Gypsy and Nicholas began to discuss the possibility of killing Dee Dee as the only viable means of securing Gypsy's freedom. Their planning became more concrete over time. Nicholas, who had a history of violent tendencies, was willing to carry out the act, while Gypsy, feeling cornered and terrified, saw no other way out. They meticulously plotted the murder, discussing various methods and the aftermath. Gypsy coached Nicholas on how to enter their home undetected and provided details about her mother's habits and vulnerabilities. The plan was simple yet brutal. Nicholas would travel to Springfield, Missouri, where Gypsy lived, and they would execute their plan. In June 2015, the plan was set in motion. Nicholas traveled from his home in Wisconsin to Missouri, ready to execute the grim plan they had concocted. On the night of June 14, Gypsy waited until Dee Dee was asleep and then let Nicholas into the house. Gypsy handed Nicholas a knife and retreated to the bathroom, covering her ears to muffle the sounds of what was to come. Nicholas entered Dee Dee's bedroom and stabbed her multiple times, ending her life in a bloody and violent confrontation. After the murder, the couple fled to Wisconsin, hoping to start anew. Gypsy posted on Facebook from her mother's account announcing Dee Dee's death in a bizarre and cryptic message intended to delay the discovery of the crime and buy them time to escape. However, their attempt at a new life was short lived. Dee Dee's body was discovered soon after, and the police quickly tracked Gypsy and Nicholas through their online activities and cell phone records. The couple was arrested in Wisconsin, and the shocking details of Gypsy's life and Dee Dee's abuse began to unravel publicly. Their relationship, though initially a source of hope for Gypsy, became a catalyst for violence as they both felt increasingly trapped and desperate. Gypsy's plea for freedom and Nicholas's willingness to do anything for her love culminated in a tragic and violent act that they both believed was their only way out. The murder of Dee Dee Blanchard was not just the end of a life, but the explosive climax of years of manipulation, abuse, and a desperate search for freedom. As Gypsy Rose Blanchard's desperation for freedom intensified, her relationship with Nicholas Godejohn took a sinister turn. Both felt that Dee Dee Blanchard's control over Gypsy was an insurmountable barrier that could only be removed through extreme measures. Over months of online communication, their conversations about escape evolved into discussions of murder. Gypsy and Nicholas meticulously planned the killing, understanding that it was the only way to liberate Gypsy from her mother's grip. They discussed various methods and logistics, weighing the risks and consequences. Gypsy provided detailed information about her home, Dee Dee's habits, and the best time to strike when Dee Dee would be most vulnerable. On the night of June 14, 2015, the plan was set into motion. Nicholas Godejohn traveled from his home in Wisconsin to Springfield, Missouri, where Gypsy lived. Gypsy waited until her mother was asleep before letting Nicholas into the house. The tension and fear were palpable as Gypsy handed Nicholas a knife, a stark symbol of the violence that was about to unfold. Gypsy retreated to the bathroom, unable to face the horror directly, but aware that the act was necessary for her freedom. She covered her ears, attempting to drown out the impending sounds of violence. Nicholas, armed with the knife, entered Dee Dee's bedroom. Dee Dee, unaware and asleep, was caught completely off guard. Nicholas stabbed Dee Dee multiple times, delivering fatal wounds as Dee Dee tried in vain to defend herself. The attack was brutal and swift, a culmination of months of planning and years of abuse. Gypsy's role in the crime was both passive and active. She did not physically commit the murder, but her involvement in planning and facilitating it was crucial. She unlocked the door for Nicholas, provided the weapon, and guided him on how to execute the plan. Gypsy's actions, driven by years of manipulation and abuse, reflected her desperation and resolve to end her suffering. Nicholas, on the other hand, executed the plan with a disturbing willingness. After the murder, Gypsy and Nicholas attempted to clean up the crime scene to delay discovery. They took cash from Dee Dee's safe and fled the scene, traveling to a motel before heading back to Nicholas's home in Wisconsin. Gypsy, in a bid to cover their tracks and create confusion, posted a message on Dee Dee's Facebook account. The post read that B is dead, a crude attempt to delay the discovery of Dee Dee's body and buy time for their escape. However, the post had the opposite effect, drawing immediate attention from friends and neighbors. Concerned by the cryptic and alarming message, they alerted the authorities. Police discovered Dee Dee's body shortly after and launched a search for Gypsy, fearing she had been kidnapped or was in danger. Investigators quickly traced the digital footprint left by Gypsy and Nicholas. Surveillance footage from the motel and tracking of their online activities led police to Godejohn's home in Wisconsin. On June 15, 2015, less than 48 hours after the murder, police arrested Gypsy and Nicholas. The arrest marked the end of their short-lived escape and the beginning of a complex legal battle that would captivate the nation. Following their arrest, the shocking truth about Gypsy's life began to emerge. Investigators and the public were stunned to learn about the years of abuse and manipulation she had endured at the hands of Dee Dee. Gypsy, initially portrayed as a helpless victim, was revealed to have been a pawn in Dee Dee's elaborate scheme of deception. The case quickly gained national attention, with media outlets delving into the bizarre and tragic details. As more information surfaced, the narrative shifted from a simple murder case to a profound exploration of psychological abuse and the limits of human endurance. The arrest and subsequent investigation laid bare the horrific reality of Gypsy's life, turning public opinion in her favor. While she had participated in a gruesome crime, many saw her as a victim of her circumstances, manipulated and driven to desperation by her mother's relentless control. The legal proceedings that followed would further explore the depths of Dee Dee's abuse and the justification for Gypsy's drastic actions. In the courtroom, Gypsy's defense team painted a vivid picture of the psychological torment she had endured. They argued that Gypsy's actions were the result of years of abuse and manipulation, which had left her with no other viable options. The defense highlighted Dee Dee's pattern of deceit, the fabricated illnesses, and the severe physical and emotional abuse. The prosecution, while acknowledging the abuse, maintained that Gypsy's involvement in the murder was premeditated and deliberate. Ultimately, Gypsy pled guilty to second-degree murder in July 2016 and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Nicholas Godejohn faced a separate trial where he was found guilty of first-degree murder in November 2018 and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The sentences reflected the complex nature of the case, balancing the severity of the crime with the mitigating circumstances of Gypsy's abuse. The murder of Dee Dee Blanchard was not just the end of a life, but the explosive climax of a deeply disturbing saga of control, manipulation, and a desperate bid for freedom. It left an indelible mark on those who followed the case, highlighting the dark extremes of parental abuse and the tragic consequences it can spawn. On June 14, 2015, Gypsy Blanchard and Nicholas Godejohn executed their plan to murder Dee Dee Blanchard. After the murder, they fled to Wisconsin, believing they had covered their tracks well enough to delay detection. However, the alarmingly blunt Facebook post made by Gypsy from Dee Dee's account that B is dead immediately drew attention. Friends and neighbors, concerned by the disturbing message, contacted the police. When authorities arrived at the Blanchard home, they found Dee Dee's lifeless body lying in her bed, covered in stab wounds. The search for Gypsy began under the assumption that she had been abducted or was in grave danger. Using digital forensic techniques, investigators quickly tracked Gypsy and Nicholas to Godejohn's home in Wisconsin. Surveillance footage and online activity, including the trail left by the infamous Facebook post, provided clear leads. On June 15, 2015, less than 48 hours after the murder, police apprehended Gypsy and Nicholas. During questioning, the bizarre and horrifying details of Gypsy's life under Dee Dee's control began to emerge, transforming the case from a straightforward murder to a complex story of abuse and manipulation. As the legal process unfolded, the stark contrast between Gypsy's life story and the crime she committed captivated the nation. Gypsy's defense attorneys presented a harrowing narrative of years of medical abuse and psychological torture inflicted by Dee Dee. They argued that Gypsy's involvement in her mother's murder was a desperate act driven by the extreme conditions she endured. The defense underscored Dee Dee's extensive medical fraud, manipulation of doctors, and the physical and emotional abuse Gypsy suffered. On July 5, 2016, Gypsy accepted a plea bargain and pled guilty to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of her sentence. This relatively lenient sentence reflected the court's acknowledgement of the severe abuse and manipulation Gypsy endured, which significantly mitigated her culpability. Nicholas Godejohn, however, faced a much different fate. Unlike Gypsy, he did not take a plea deal and instead went to trial. Prosecutors portrayed him as a willing participant who played a critical role in the murder. They presented evidence of his violent fantasies and willingness to act on Gypsy's desperate pleas for help. On November 15, 2018, after a week-long trial, Godejohn was found guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, reflecting the premeditated nature of his involvement in the murder. The revelation of Gypsy's life story and the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard sent shockwaves through the public and media. The case raised profound questions about the nature of abuse, the failures of medical professionals to detect Munchausen by proxy, and the justice system's handling of victims who become perpetrators. Gypsy's story garnered widespread sympathy, with many viewing her as a tragic figure who had been driven to extreme measures by her mother's horrific actions. The case received extensive media coverage, including documentaries like Mommy, Dead and Dearest and the Hulu series The Act. These portrayals brought national attention to the complexities of Munchausen by proxy, highlighting the psychological and physical toll it takes on its victims. The media coverage also spurred discussions about the healthcare system's responsibilities and the importance of recognizing and intervening in cases of severe abuse. Public opinion on the case was divided. While many sympathized with Gypsy and believed her sentence was just given the circumstances, others argued that the murder was premeditated and deserved harsher punishment. Nicholas Godejohn's life sentence was largely seen as appropriate, given his direct involvement in the violent act. The case also sparked debates about the mental health support needed for individuals like Nicholas, who had a history of mental illness and behavioral issues. The legal proceedings and media portrayals contributed to a broader awareness and understanding of the psychological manipulation and abuse inherent in Munchausen by proxy. Gypsy's case highlighted the need for better protective measures and support systems for vulnerable individuals trapped in abusive situations. It also underscored the importance of vigilance and accountability in the medical community to prevent such cases from going undetected. The tragic case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard remains a poignant example of the extreme consequences of abuse and the lengths to which a person might go to escape it. While Gypsy's actions were driven by desperation, they resulted in a violent end that no one could ignore. The case continues to resonate, prompting ongoing discussions about abuse, mental health, and justice. Gypsy's story is a stark reminder of the complexities of human behavior and the urgent need for compassion, understanding, and intervention in cases of severe abuse and psychological manipulation. Munchausen syndrome by proxy MSP, also known as factitious disorder imposed on another, is a psychological disorder where a caregiver deliberately exaggerates, fabricates, or induces medical symptoms in someone under their care. The primary motive is to gain attention, sympathy, and admiration from others, often by portraying themselves as dedicated and selfless caregivers. In the case of Dee Dee Blanchard, this meant subjecting her daughter Gypsy to years of unnecessary medical treatments, surgeries, and medications. MSP is a severe form of abuse that can lead to long-term physical and psychological damage for the victim. Victims of MSP, like Gypsy Rose Blanchard, endure a complex form of abuse that combines physical harm with intense psychological manipulation. The caregiver's actions create a controlled environment where the victim's reality is entirely dictated by the abuser. This can lead to chronic health issues, developmental delays, and severe psychological trauma. The constant reinforcement of illness conditions the victim to believe they are genuinely sick, fostering a deep sense of dependency and helplessness. Dee Dee Blanchard's actions were extreme even within the context of MSP. She meticulously curated a narrative of her daughter's illnesses, manipulating medical records and healthcare providers to maintain the facade. Dee Dee's need for control and attention drove her to isolate Gypsy, keeping her out of school and away from anyone who might challenge the narrative. She thrived on the sympathy and support she received from the community and various charitable organizations. This pathological behavior points to a deeply disturbed psychological profile characterized by narcissistic and histrionic personality traits. Dee Dee's behavior was also marked by a deep-seated need for validation and a manipulative nature. She was adept at convincing medical professionals of Gypsy's supposed conditions, switching doctors frequently to avoid suspicion. Dee Dee's life revolved around maintaining the image of a devoted mother to a chronically ill child, an image that brought her significant social and financial benefits. This constant need for external validation and the lengths she went to achieve it illustrate the severe pathology of her condition. The psychological and emotional toll on Gypsy Rose Blanchard was immense. From a young age, she was conditioned to believe she was severely ill and dependent on her mother for survival. This created a profound sense of powerlessness and fear. Gypsy was not only physically confined to a wheelchair, but also mentally imprisoned by her mother's lies and control. The isolation and constant reinforcement of her sickness eroded her sense of self and autonomy. Gypsy's cognitive and emotional development was significantly stunted by Dee Dee's manipulation. She was kept out of school, had limited social interactions, and was fed a constant stream of false information about her health. As she grew older and began to realize the truth, the psychological conflict intensified. The realization that her mother had been lying to her and the world was both liberating and terrifying. This cognitive dissonance, coupled with years of trauma, pushed Gypsy to a breaking point. The long-term psychological abuse left Gypsy with severe trust issues and emotional scars. The manipulation and control she experienced at the hands of Dee Dee shaped her worldview and her understanding of relationships. Gypsy's decision to involve Nicholas Godejohn in the murder plot was influenced by her desperate need to escape and her inability to see any other way out. The impact of the abuse was so profound that it led her to take extreme measures, believing that murder was the only viable solution. The case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard is a harrowing example of the devastating effects of Munchausen by proxy. It highlights the extreme lengths to which an abuser can go to maintain control and the profound impact such abuse can have on the victim. Gypsy's life was a web of lies and manipulation, orchestrated by her mother to gain sympathy and attention. The culmination of this abuse in the brutal murder of Dee Dee underscores the desperation and psychological turmoil that victims of MSP endure. This case sheds light on the broader issue of psychological abuse and the complexities of identifying and intervening in such situations. It underscores the importance of vigilance and awareness among medical professionals, educators, and social workers in recognizing the signs of MSP and other forms of abuse. The story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard also prompts a reevaluation of how the justice system handles cases involving long-term abuse victims who commit crimes. It raises critical questions about accountability, compassion, and the need for mental health support for both victims and perpetrators. Thank you for joining us as we explored the twisted and tragic case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Her story is a stark reminder of the hidden horrors that can exist behind closed doors. If you found this case compelling, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories and psychological analyses. In our next video, we will dive into another shocking true crime case that will leave you questioning the limits of human behavior and the depths of psychological manipulation. Stay tuned and don't forget to like and share this video.